Hey, Nation, you got Keith and Di here with Shake and Die.
What's up?
Hey, buddy. Two dads in a lab trying to be 2% better today. And Di, we have a special guest today. We have a third dad.
Oh, I just, you know what I just did? I went live on Instagram for the first time and I got it playing in my ear while you're talking to me. And I'm sorry, I just muted that out. So it's all good. What'd you just say to me, Keith?
Oh, so Di's on the delayed. You guys are all getting two dads in a lab trying to be 2%. Di's trying to be 5% better here. But so we are streaming today on Di's Instagram feed as well. We don't have any fun here in the lab. We got a third dad joining us here today. We have Wayne Boatwright. Di, Manuel.
I'm stoked. This is going to be such a great conversation, especially I know you shared out some of Wayne's content, especially he's got some great articles on Medium. And I was reading them and I was like, wow, I can't wait for us to talk to him, especially around this idea of parenting beyond prison. And the one article where he talks about why daddy, like just the question around that. I can't wait to hear him talk about this. I think it's just really fantastic. All
right. So here's the Hook Nation, 2% Nation, Business Athlete Nation. Joining us in mere seconds, Wayne Boatwright spent 6.5 years in San Quentin prison. Unfortunately, was involved in a fatal drunk driving accident and is here to talk about that and share his life story. We're going to shoot 2 episodes here. So bear with us at the 20-25 minute mark. We're going to wrap it up and do it again. So stick around for the hour. LinkedIn, X, YouTube, Instagram, all the platforms. Welcome to Di Manuel's 2% Solution Nation. And let's welcome Wayne Boatwright to the stage. Wayne, welcome to the lab with the two dads.
It is good to be here, guys, with the dads. You're giving up those signs. I got to tell you, I grew up in LA. Okay. I'm a 5th generation Californian, been all around, but I grew up in LA. And whenever something exciting happens with my kids, I use the word dude, not the hand side, dude. And it is a magic word that can be used in more ways than any other word I know, even more than the F word, as far as I'm concerned. Dude is an important word. And you gave the hand sign that just brought me back to dude time. Maybe hanging loose or maybe Hawaiian, but it's right where I am. And I found out you guys are both Canadians. Oh, and that gave me pause. Okay, I got to be honest. It gave me pause. So I'll be honest about this. I'm a deep thinker. I read a lot. I study a lot. I love learning new things. And I consider modern Canada is equivalent to Scotland during the Enlightenment. Now, does that sound crazy? Of course it does. Of course it does. Remember, as I told you guys off stage, ideas for me are not light bulbs, are like chandeliers. They're really complex, which I lose people really easy. So I apologize if that happens. And if you need to bring me back, let me know. The connection is there's a lot of great Canadian philosophers, a lot of great Scottish philosophers in the Age of the Enlightenment. They help us bring about this new time. And for me, 3 of my favorite deep thinkers, you got it, they're Canadian. Who would think? One is called Václav Smil, of course. Jordan Peterson, love Jordan Peterson. I actually, when I was, as you mentioned, and we'll get into this a little later, when I was in prison, I wouldn't let people help me. They couldn't send me money or do stuff like that. I'd always say, just send me a book you like if you want to do something for me. Because not only was it something I could enjoy, then I could donate that book to the library so other people could. That was my mindset. Somebody sent me Maps of Meaning, which if you really want to understand Jordan Peterson, you got to read that one, which came out in 98, not his newer ones that are more for, the newer ones are like fast food, right? That was his gourmet feast, was Maps of Meaning. That book is definitely one worth reading. Jordan Peterson, Václav Smil has written maybe 30 books. One of my favorite one is called Numbers Don't Lie. This guy is one of the most brilliant. I call him the denominator because he helps us understand systems and feedback loops and ratios so we can understand how things work. So Václav Smil is another one. The third one, the one who blew my mind the most and explains our modern era the most, is named Marshall McLuhan. And Marshall McLuhan died, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. He came up with, his concept was the medium is the message. And his seminal book was called The Gutenberg Galaxy, the Typographic Man. So these are guys. So I'm talking to you Canadians. I'm just going to assume you guys all swim in the same soup. So these are things that are important. If you don't consider yourself part of that class, I get it. Because you have this show, because you recognize the importance of just be 2% better. I think you're up there and you understand these concepts at that fundamental level. But if I could get anything, read those three guys, Marshall McLuhan, Vaclav Smil, and Jordan Peterson's first book. His next two books are great for dads. I'm not saying that. 12 Rules for Life, great book. But for me, okay, this may not apply to either of you, and I get that. I'm the wonk who actually reads footnotes. Okay. I actually open the links people put in their articles to see what they're talking about. I'm that nerdy. So I get it if maps of meaning is too dense for a lot of people, but I found it to be transformative for me and how I understand the world. And that's part of our story, right?
Yeah. Wayne, we Di and I brought you into the lab today to not only share your story through your transition in life, but also to, as you've been finding your next. I know that Keith and Di, our mission here is to just help dads, give them advice to try to be 2% better every single day. You've been on a journey. It's been a journey through, I can only imagine it's been a journey of hell. Share that journey with Di and myself and how you've gotten through hell, how you sit here in front of us today, and share with our audience in a micro capsule, the Wayne Boatwright story.
Sure. The caveat is nobody wants to be defined by a single event, do we? We all seek to live a full life and be useful throughout our lives. In my case, I had the American dream story. I was the quintessential meritocracy success story growing up. I was raised by a single mother with a half brother in rent-controlled government housing, shared a bedroom throughout my whole childhood, bought my family's first TV, my family's first car. Senior year in high school, I only went to school for 2 periods. The rest of the day I did work study and I worked so I could make money. But then I also realized I was smart. I didn't start college till I was 21 and I had to go all the way back to the beginning. I took remedial courses. I've forgotten everything from high school. But I kept my act together and I focused on it. And I ultimately went to Cornell Law School, which is one of the Ivy Leagues. To go there at law school, you have to get above the 99th percentile on the LSATs. You have to be smart. And I knew I was smart. I knew I was smart until I got to law school. That's when you meet smart people. But I did that. And then I wasn't your TV lawyer, right? I wasn't a litigator. I wasn't into criminal law. I was a business lawyer. I wanted to help founders of businesses succeed, to actually accomplish what they hope to and not get blindsided, as many of them do because they're naive, to be honest. And so that was the kind of lawyer I was, and I had a great time. I lived for a couple of years. I lived in Korea for 6 years as a foreign legal consultant. I met Jeff Bezos, Michael Bloomberg, George Soros, the King of Norway. I partied with Stevie Wonder and his band one night when they were in town for a concert. I got to do great stuff as a lawyer. And then I came to the Bay Area, and I think that's where this story starts to change. I came here with Accenture, which is a global consulting firm. I had a global role with them and traveled all over the world. Again, the classic meritocracy story. I was living life. I was loving it. Married, had 2 kids, owned a house, all the stuff you'd want. And I got bit by the startup bug. So most of my work before my crime was working with founders of startup companies, tech companies in Silicon Valley, and covering a whole range of crazy stuff. Loved it. That was what I did. I helped them accomplish their goals as a lawyer. But in Korea, to start this transition, in Korea, it's a different culture and it's very strict. It's what I call a hierarchical culture, not a horizontal culture. We live in a horizontal culture. Everybody's equal. We all think we're middle class, all that stuff, right? They appreciate their vertical culture. Everybody's very structured and you have titles. And the only time they're allowed to be honest is if they get drunk. So you have business meetings, then you go out to dinner and you drink at dinner, and then you go out to at least 1 or 2 bars after that, usually ending in a karaoke bar. They call it a nori bong there, but it's the same thing. You're drinking the whole time, and that's when you can actually tell people what you really think. I had never actually had a drink until I moved to Korea, but business required it, right? So I started drinking, and it was business related and social related to begin with. But as I think happens to far too many people, I started to use alcohol as a coping mechanism. And that led, as I had more challenges in my life, career-wise, family-wise, not necessarily within my marriage, but with my mother and my special needs brother, I started to use alcohol more and more as a coping mechanism. And then you get a physical addiction to it because you're using it that often. So those two are what's called a positive feedback loop. They build on each other, right? And so it gets worse and worse. By the time I committed my crime, I was the guy that would buy a little fifth plastic bottle and hide it so I'd have it with me all the time. I was drinking daily, not nightly, daily, right? Because this coping mechanism seemed to work. And I've learned a lot since then, but I'll keep it in this context right now. So when my family had problems, my mother fell down a couple flights of stairs and broke her hip, and she was on hospice, and my brother was special needs, and they were codependents. I wanted them to live together, but a facility wouldn't take both of them because too young. And so I had to play all these games. And so I was driving down to LA like every 3 to 4 weeks from San Francisco, which is where I was living. And the idiot and too proudful person that I couldn't ask for help. I had to be better, faster, stronger. That had always worked for me in the past. That's how I got to law school. That's how I had a career. Better, faster, stronger was my mantra. But that engenders a sense of pride. It's false pride, but a sense of pride, right? And that pride means you can't show any weakness either, because I came from a society of scarcity, not one of collaboration. And when you come from scarcity, you hide your faults. Everybody does to some degree. Trust me, if you come from a competition, you hide it even more than you would think. And so I hid the fact that I was drinking from my family, from my wife. Of course, they knew I was drinking. They thought I had bad days. They didn't know I was an alcoholic necessarily. Neither did I, to be honest. And so I thought it was really smart to help my family by self-medicating with alcohol, a coping mechanism. And I think people misconstrue this in our mental health space all the time. Alcoholism isn't the problem. The addiction never is the problem. It's a coping mechanism for the problem. And I find all these mental health professionals that we hear about, and unfortunately so many of our kids go to see, they only treat symptoms. They don't treat root causes. So they never cure anybody. That's why you keep seeing people your whole life, in my opinion. So my challenge was that this coping mechanism was taking over my life. And on the day of my accident, I had admitted my mother and brother to an assisted living facility, cleaning out their apartment. They were hoarders, if you know what that means. And so I thought it was smart to drink Red Bull vodkas as I did that. And I was so proudful, arrogant, that I thought it was smart to continue to drink as I tried to drive home to San Francisco. And that's when I had my crime, my accident. I don't remember it. I was blackout drunk, was going the wrong way on a freeway, had a head-on collision, took a life, injured other people, and I took a life. It's not trauma and pain. It's power. You think you want to know what power is? You want to learn to have a wake-up call and learn that you've got to. Unfortunately, it took somebody's losing their life for me to recognize that I had a hell of a lot more power than I ever thought. And I was misusing it. And I had to learn to control it.
Wayne,
That's how I got there.
Sure. I'm gonna interrupt you here because we're having a little bit of audio issues on your end, and I don't want to miss this important conversation. So the timing is great, Di. Wayne, I'm just going to put you back into the green room there. Maybe you can refresh your browser or come back out, come back in. But we're not catching all the words, and I want to make sure we catch that. So I'm just going to stick you back out in the green room for a second, remove you. If you can refresh your browser, log back out, log back in, that'd be great. I want to get back to the second part. So Di, just to recap here, we've heard Wayne's story.
Yeah, and it's interesting hearing Wayne share this, because I didn't take a life, but I do remember one night being blackout and passing out at the wheel and literally going through a T intersection and ending up in just inches from a tree. Almost rode off my car. And this was one of the earliest wake-up calls I had. It's probably about 17 years ago. Obviously, it's been about 15 years since I had a drink, but I was slow to learn, because even though I had that situation, It could have been very different. And so listening to Wayne share this, I'm like, oh man, it's bringing back some memories, which is like,
I was wondering, as I was watching you, and I know you've been very kind and shared your personal stories with me and very vulnerable with me. And as I was listening to Wayne, I was wondering how you were processing his story and asking yourself some questions, what if as well, right?
It's interesting because I think everyone's got one of those stories where we know where we've drank too much, we've gone past that line, and we've done something that creates regret. Right? Because if we could go back and be like, man, I wish I didn't have that last drink. Yeah. But we have to wonder, like, how many times do we need to have that same regret before we finally make a change?
Yes.
And unfortunately, a lot of times we don't change until something drastic happens. And I think Wayne, that's really what his short story is telling us, is it was one too many and it went across that line, and there's no going back once you cross that line. And that's the finality of it. And it's definitely, but it's more common than I think we accept or know, culturally speaking.
Yes. So Di, we're going to welcome back in for Wayne for part 2 of our episode. We're going to wrap up part 1 here for our audience. And I know, Di, our goal here with these is to give our audience something to think about. Is it obvious maybe?
I think, and Wayne's addressed it. He mentioned this idea of asking for help and not asking for help. And I think if we're speaking to other men out there, other fathers, you're struggling, that this is maybe a challenge or something that you're wanting to see change, the number one thing you can do is just reach out to somebody and ask for help. Once I did that, the rest of it did. And I hate using the term easier, but it became, the resistance came down. Because I didn't feel so alone anymore. And also the funny thing is, when I reached out for help, there was other people on the other side that said, oh, me too. I had that same problem or that same challenge. And all of a sudden, this idea that I was alone in this suffering and alone in this situation, it melted away. And I realized I'm not alone. And so my encouragement or invitation is, if you are on the edge or you are thinking that this is something you want to change and you want some help, get around some other people that are positive and in the same mind, just reach out. Keith, you and I, we're here. I know Wayne is also here. Reach out to us. We're very public. We're not hard to find. Yes. And so that is an open invitation.
Great advice, Di. Open invitation for Keith and Di if you guys need help or just somebody to talk to. Send us a text. And no, we're not going to get on the air and talk about it. I can assure you, because I can tell you, both nations, I've had people reach out to me, and I can assure you that this stays between us. So we're going to, Keith and Di are going to step out. We're going to bring Wayne back in for part 2 of Two Dads in the Lab Trying to Be 2% Better with Wayne Boatwright from San Quentin to his next part in life. Boom.